Good evening. Welcome to the November 2nd meeting of Troy City Council. Please silence your electronic devices for the duration of the meeting. We'll begin with the invocation by Mr. Brock Heath, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand.
Okay, let's go ahead and pray. God, thank you for this time together. God, help us to make the decisions that are correct according to what you want to happen for our city. Allow us to move forward in success and victory in all areas. God, watch over our warriors that are overseas, taking care of the evil that's out there, God. I know one of the tactics of the enemy is that he tries to make it so we don't think there is evil, and there is. Put your hedge of protection, put your godly armor and your strength around them, and help them to wipe those out. In your name and your son's name, amen.
Amen.
I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mrs. Snee. Here. Mr. Heath.
Here.
Mr. Clark.
Here.
Mr. Swazer.
Here.
Mr. Kendall.
Here.
Mr. Tremblay.
Here.
Mr. Twist.
Here.
Mr. Phillips.
Here.
Mrs. Oda.
Move that we excuse Mrs. Oda.
Second.
It's been moved by Mrs. Snee and seconded by Mr. Clark to excuse Mrs. Oda. Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mr. Heath.
Yes.
Mr. Clark.
Yes.
Mr. Swazer.
Yes.
Mr. Kendall.
Yes.
Mr. Tremblay.
Yes.
Mr. Twist.
Yes.
Mr. Phillips.
Yes.
Mrs. Snee.
Yes.
Mrs. Oda is excused.
Mrs. Knight, please read a summary of the minutes of the October 19th meeting of Troy City Council.
Minutes of Council, October 19. Committee reports. Law and Ordinance Committee reported recommending that ordinances be amended related to mobile food vehicles to provide more opportunities for the operators of those vehicles. Streets and Sidewalks Committee recommended legislation be prepared to request the Ohio Department of Transportation to perform review of study related to the speed limit on McCaig Road. Utilities Committee reported that committee recommends legislation be prepared approving the vacation dedication of a storm sewer easement at 15 North Kings Chapel Drive. Resolution number R52, 2015, perform a study of speed related to McCaig Road, was given first reading and adopted. Ordinance number 038, 2015, vacate a storm sewer easement, first reading and adopted. Ordinance number 039, 2015, amend ordinances regarding mobile food vehicles, first reading and adopted. Following comments, council adjourned 7:43 p.m.
Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes?
Move to accept the minutes as read.
Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Clark and seconded by Mr. Phillips to accept the minutes. Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Mr. Swazer?
Yes.
Mr. Kendall?
Yes.
Mr. Tremblay?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mrs. Snee?
Yes.
Mr. Heath?
Yes.
Minutes are approved.
Move to committee reports. The first report this evening is from the Buildings Committee and Chairman Mrs. Lynn Snee.
Thank you, Madam President. Committee members Snee and Phillips met on October 28th to consider recommending increasing the authorization for the facade improvement project at 121 Public Square Northeast. Both bids received exceeded the $65,000 authorized. This is a CDBG project, and the state will allow the reassignment of up to $5,000 of CDBG funds to accommodate the additional cost. It is the recommendation of this committee that legislation be prepared increasing the authorization for the facade improvement project at 121 Public Square Northeast to $70,000 and authorizing the Director of Public Service and Safety to enter into a contract with the low bidder, Becker Construction Incorporated of Dayton, Ohio. As CDBG regulations require that these funds be expended by year end, we support emergency legislation so that a contract can be executed as soon as possible. This is respectfully submitted by Mrs. Oda, Mr. Phillips, and myself as chair.
Are there any questions from council? Thank you, Mrs. Snee. The next report is from the Personnel Committee and Chairman Mr. Alan Clark.
Thank you, Madam President. On October 28th, this committee met to consider authorizing an agreement for labor council associated with the collective bargaining process. The city has 6 bargaining unit agreements that expire at year end. It is the recommendation of this committee that legislation be prepared authorizing the Director of Public Service and Safety to enter into an agreement with the firm of Denlinger, Rosenthal, and Greenberg for legal services for collective bargaining and related personnel services. Respectfully submitted, Mr. Kendall, Mr. Twist, and myself as chairman.
Do any council members have questions? Thank you, Mr. Clark. The last reports are from the Recreation and Parks Committee and Chairman, Mr. Brock Heath.
Thank you, Madam President. We have two tonight. On October 28th, committee members Tremblay and Heath met to consider recommending a real estate purchase option agreement with the Board of Commissioners of Miami County Park District related to the County Park District purchasing approximately 38 acres of the Hules Camp Farm, which land is adjacent to the Paul G. Duke Park. The County Park District is submitting a grant application for the funding for the purchase and has requested the option so that it can be submitted with the grant application. It's our recommendation of this committee that legislation be prepared authorizing the Director of Public Service and Safety to enter into a real estate purchase option agreement with the Board of Commissioners of Miami County Park District related to the County Park District purchasing approximately 38 acres of the land known as Hules Camp Farm. Because of the funding application must be submitted in the very near future, we support the request of the County Park District for emergency legislation. This is respectfully submitted by Mrs. Oda, Mr. Tremblay, and myself as chair.
Are there any questions from council on the report? You may continue, Mr. Heath.
Thank you, Madam President. On October 28th, committee members Tremblay and Heath met to consider authorizing bidding for the concession operations at the Paul G. Duke Park. The concession contracts for the Little League football field and the softball fields expired at the end of the year. The Recreation Board has recommended that the council authorize bidding new contracts. These contracts will be based on a 2-year period plus 2 one-year optional mutually agreeable periods after that. It's our recommendation of the committee that legislation be prepared authorizing the Recreation Board of the City of Troy to advise for bids and enter into the contracts for the operation of the concessions at the Paul G. Duke softball fields and the Paul G. Duke Little League football field. Respectfully submitted by Mrs. Oda, Mr. Tremblay, and myself as chair again.
Are there any questions or comments from council? Thank you, Mr. Heath. We now open the meeting to citizen comments. There is a 2-minute time limit at this point in the meeting, and Mr. Livingston is our timekeeper. Does anyone in the audience have any questions or comments related to any of the agenda items this evening? If so, please come to the microphone and state your name and address before addressing council.
Lester Connor, 1210 South Clay Street. I was just wondering, that law firm that he recommended or want to get, where are they located? Are they out of Troy or Columbus or Cincinnati? Or
No, they're out of Cincinnati.
out of Cincinnati? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to resolutions then. Mrs. Knight, please read Resolution R53, 2015.
Resolution number R53, 2015. Resolution authorizing the Recreation Board of the City of Troy, Ohio to advertise for bids and enter into contracts for the operation of concessions at the Paul G. Duke Park softball field and the Paul G. Duke Park Little League football fields. The current agreements expire at year end. This is the first reading.
Are there any questions from council?
Motion to suspend.
It's been moved by Mr. Phillips and seconded by Mr. Twist to suspend the rules. Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mr. Swazer?
Yes.
Mr. Kendall?
Yes.
Mr. Tremblay?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mrs. Snee?
Yes.
Mr. Heath?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Move to it. Move to adopt. Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Phillips and seconded by Mr. Kendall to adopt the resolution. Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mr. Kendall?
Yes.
Mr. Tremblay?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mrs. Snee?
Yes.
Mr. Heath?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Mr. Swazer?
Yes.
Resolution is adopted.
Mrs. Knight, please read Resolution R54, 2015.
Resolution number R54, 2015. Resolution authorizing the Director of Public Service and Safety of the City of Troy, Ohio, to employ counsel for the purposes of collective bargaining, for purposes of negotiations and collective bargaining. This will authorize the agreement with the firm of Denlinger, Rosenthal, and Greenberg. First reading.
Are there any questions from council?
Move for suspension.
Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Clark and seconded by Mr. Twist to suspend the rules. Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mr. Tremblay?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mrs. Sneed?
Yes.
Mr. Heath?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Mr. Swazer?
Yes.
Mr. Kendall?
Yes. Move it down. Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Schweizer and seconded by Mr. Kendall to adopt the resolution. Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mrs. Sneed?
Yes.
Mr. Heath?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Mr. Swazer?
Yes.
Mr. Kendall?
Yes.
Mr. Tremblay?
Yes.
Resolution is adopted.
Mrs. Knight, please read Resolution R-55, 2015.
Resolution number R-55, 2015, resolution increasing the authorization for the contract for the facade improvements to 121 Public Square Northeast, and authorizing the Director of Public Service and Safety to enter into a contract with Becker Construction, Inc. of Dayton, Ohio for such project and declaring an emergency. This increases the authorization by $5,000 to the amount of $70,000. The emergency is so that a contract can be issued as the funds must be spent by the end of the year, and this is all from CDBG funds. First reading.
Are there any questions from council?
Move for suspension.
Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Phillips and seconded by Mr. Twist to suspend the rules. Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mrs. Sneed?
Yes.
Mr. Heath?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Mr. Swazer?
Yes.
Mr. Kendall?
Yes.
Mr. Tremblay?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Move to adopt.
Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Clark and seconded by Mr. Kendall to adopt the resolution. Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mrs. Sneed?
Yes.
Mr. Heath?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Mr. Swazer?
Yes.
Mr. Kendall?
Yes.
Mr. Tremblay?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Resolution is adopted.
Mrs. Knight, please read Resolution R-56, 2015.
Resolution number R-56, 2015, resolution authorizing the Director of Public Service and Safety to enter into an agreement granting the Board of Commissioners of the Miami County Park District the option to purchase an approximate 33-acre parcel of the Paul G. Duke Park for public park purposes. This is the first reading.
Are there any questions from council?
Move for suspension. Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Kendall and seconded by Mr. Phillips to suspend the rules. Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mr. Heath?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Mr. Swazer?
Yes.
Mr. Kendall?
Yes.
Mr. Tremblay?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mrs. Sneed?
Yes.
Move to adopt.
Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Schweizer and seconded by Mr. Clark to adopt the resolution. Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Mr. Swazer?
Yes.
Mr. Kendall?
Yes.
Mr. Tremblay?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mrs. Sneed?
Yes.
Mr. Heath?
Yes.
Resolution is adopted.
We have no ordinances tonight. That completes the business portion of tonight's meeting. Mrs. Knight, are there any communications or announcements?
They're not.
Mayor Bumish, do you have any comments this evening?
No, just that it's a big day tomorrow for all of us, and a privilege and that we all have to exercise tomorrow, and there's state, local issues. So hope everybody gets out and votes. And also, yesterday we inducted 6 individuals into the Troy Hall of Fame, all well-deserved, come from different walks of life, but all contributing to the community and throughout the region. So you probably already know who they are. So. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Titterington, any comments this evening?
Nothing this evening. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Livingston. Mr. Livingston, do you have any comments this evening?
Nothing for me this evening, Madam President.
Thank you. Mr. Stickle, any comments?
Thanks, Madam Chair. I'm happy to announce that the Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting has been awarded to the City of Troy for its comprehensive annual financial report. The Certificate of Achievement is the highest form of recognition in the area of governmental accounting and financial reporting.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Are there any comments from council members this evening?
Madam President.
Mr. Clark?
Yeah, I'd like to thank Mr. Roger Adams for the Christmas tree that's soon to be placed on the public square. I don't want to get into the season this early, but by God, it's going to happen whether I want to or not.
Tis the season.
Madam President.
Mrs. Sneak?
It is the season where I get to once again offer congratulations to the Troy High School Marching Band, who earned a superior rating at the state competition. They've earned a superior every year since since 2000, and have participated every year since 1980. So congratulations, and to Kathy McIntosh, who is also the Troy Educator of the Year this year.
Right. Thank you. Anyone else on council? Any members of city staff have any comments this evening? Anyone else in the audience have any comments?
Good evening, Council. How are you doing?
Fine. How are you, Mr.?
Pretty good. My name is Andrew Luring. I live at 478 Robin Hood Lane. I have a couple questions. Concerning this resolution R54 2015, employing legal counsel for collective bargaining, what's the price tag on that, and do you have the qualifications to act as a negotiator instead of employing outside legal counsel?
It's outside of my area of expertise.
Okay.
And
What kind of money are we
price
talking
tag,
about?
do we have a price on that, or
We really don't, because it just depends. It's an hourly rate, and it just depends on how prolonged the negotiations are, whether they involve any outside mediation or arbitration or anything like that. So it can vary, but since it could go above the $50,000 limit, that's when we ask council for authorization.
How does the city go about finding legal counsel for this sort of thing?
We have used the same counsel for decades, I believe.
Is that prudent to use the same counsel for a decade, for multiple decades?
I believe it is in this case, because we have 6 different contracts, and they are very well versed in the contracts.
Okay. I guess I'll move on then. Has the city ever considered making police officers part-time?
We do, in fact, have an auxiliary force. They don't have the same police powers as our full-time sworn officers.
Okay. I got a couple more. The money that I guess we were getting from Time Warner, I believe, for the public access, which is no longer in existence. Why is it no longer in existence? And secondarily, where is that money going to now?
The franchise fees have been collected. The first 3% go into the general fund, as they have, again, for a couple of decades now. The other 2% goes into a technology fund. I think one thing I would respectfully correct you on is that the money that is collected from Time Warner is not specific to and was not collected specifically to fund the public access channel. That is a franchise fee for the use of our right-of-way. Again, it's been in existence for a couple of decades. So the fact that we no longer have public access, we still do collect that. It still does offset the use of the Time Warner has of our right-of-way. The other portion of it does go to the technology fund, which funds capital and equipment needs of the city related to our technology concerns.
Okay. I guess to go back to a former question, who is counsel that we've been using as the city of Troy for the past couple of decades?
It's a law firm of Denlinger, Rosenberg, and Greenberg.
Okay. I have one more question. The former Hobart site, has that site been sold? The
ITW across from the
Yes, sir.
health department, health district. No, that is still owned by Hobart.
Okay. And so, like, as far as that sale goes, does the city involved with that at all with the bidding process, or is that solely just ITW?
The city is consulting with the Troy Development Council. Troy Development Council is had recently contracted with a firm to do an economic development study to determine some options for the best use, I guess the best economic development reuse of that property to I guess, make some recommendations to Hobart, but ultimately the negotiations and the sale of that property are between Hobart, ITW, and whoever the buyer would happen to be.
But the city of Troy is paying the firm that's going to do this economic development study. Who's paying that firm?
No, the TDC has the contract with the firm. The city did pay for half of that study.
Okay. Why would the city pay for half of something that it doesn't really have a say in the sale of a property? Why would the city foot a bill for something that has no say in actual or control in what the entity that owns the plot actually does with the property?
Because the city is vitally interested in the kind of reuse that might happen at Hobart and on that site, and Hobart could have sold that to whoever they wanted to.
And they still can't they?
They could. Well, no, because they do have an agreement for 3 years that they would take the advice of the TDC and work with the TDC on that. So they do have a contract with them.
Okay. And I guess I have one more question for you. And this goes back to the food truck ordinance and the 100-yard consent that's required. Has anyone within the city taken out a measuring stick and identified where 100-yard is away from all businesses so that an individual wouldn't have to deal with getting written consent?
We have GIS, we have aerial maps. We can very easily do that. If somebody says they want to sell at a particular spot, we can easily do a 100-yard circumference of that.
Would it be prudent to just, if it's so easily done, to just do it and then you can put it up on the city website and say, look, people, here's the spot, you can do it, here's the GPS, just look at it?
Would that be easy? No, because the size of the map and the digitization would be pretty large.
I know, yeah, but I think you just doubled back there a little bit. You said it was easy to come up with those numbers, and then you just said it wasn't easy.
No, that's not what I said. I said it is easy to pinpoint from a particular location and draw with a compass, with digitally, whatever, the area around which there may or may not be businesses that they would have to identify. What may be more difficult is doing that, the entire city, condensing it to the point where we can put it all on the city's website.
Well, let's not do the entire city. Let's just do the downtown because that's where people want to sell. How easy would that be?
It would not be as difficult, but I don't know that we have not received any permits, any applications, anything for anybody who wants to sell downtown.
Okay. Thank you for your time, Council.
Thank you. Anyone else in the audience have any questions or comments?
Yeah, Lester Connor, 1210 South Clay Street. Next year, this would be the third time in probably the last 6 or 7 years that we've gotten no raise on Social Security. I'm hoping that this council and Ms. Schaefer, if she wins, will take that all in consideration when they start putting the taxes or this and that, or raising the fees on different things, like utilities and so on and so forth. The senior citizens and the poor people are having a tough time here in Troy. And I've said this, I beat this horse several different times up here, and the horse is dead. There's no doubt about it. The horse is dead, but I beat it anyway, but it never seems to go any further than me asking. But maybe next year it'll be a little bit different, that you will consider the senior citizens and the poor people in Troy, because we aren't getting no raise again, and this will be the third time in the last 6 or 7 years. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in the audience have any comments or questions? Thank you all for attending tonight's meeting. Have a safe and peace-filled week. Meeting adjourned.